This is The Fabulist. I'm Joel Pilger. With just my curiosity and a microphone, I'm collaborating with the folks at Coop Studios to explore the fusion of creativity and commerce all around the globe. Here I'm talking to the disruptors in motion, animation, live action, sound, and experiential. Those of you who are not just participating in the creative industry, but reinventing it. So whether you're running your own studio or craving a peek behind the curtain, this podcast is your essential resource. Because I believe the future isn't just coming at us. We are actively creating it. Let's go.
All right, guys. So we are rolling. So
should we clap?
Sure. Ready?
3,
clap.
2, 1.
You guys were way more in sync than me. Ryan, John, it's super good to be with you guys for what is episode 3 of the end of the beginning of motion design. It's great to be with you guys because a lot has changed.
Well, Joel, the most important thing is that we couldn't find you for a while. Where are you and where have you been? What's been going on?
Oddly, I'm in Ibiza right now, which is a long story. I came over to Europe to go to off. But yeah, so much has changed in my world. I fell off the face of the earth about 3 months ago because of a very strange and bizarre ouster. But the important thing to know is I'm moving forward and I have a new business, new entity, a new community that I've started. So there's all kinds of stuff that I've been busy rebuilding and relaunching. And I'm very excited about what is to come. So as we do here on this episode, we always talk about the future. That's what I'm all about. But thanks for asking. What about you, Ryan? What have you been up to just in this last couple months?
Just trying to get 2023 behind us and seeing what 2024 is going to have in future in store for us. I just got back from a business development trip with the studio through New York, which I think that'll come up quite a bit, but seeing a lot of old friends, making some new friends, making the rounds. And what you can imagine is like bread and butter work in New York, talk to a lot of broadcasters, a lot of like traditional places that motion design would go to see and hear how they're feeling, what they're doing. And are they open or are they merging or are they being rewritten? And it's on the daily. So I think it's going to be an interesting insight to the rest of what's going on with all of you guys. How about you, John? What have you been up to?
Oh man, it's been a wild start to 2024. At the start of the year, I had my own 15 minutes of fame of going mega viral, which was actually perfectly coinciding with the fact that pretty soon we will be publicly launching a practice that we've been working under in stealth mode over the last year called Black Box Infinite. And 2024 is looking really strong, really exciting, and there's a lot of wild stuff going on in our immediate space. And we're also just having fun seeing all the sort of like chaos that's unfolding everywhere else and tracking all of that, as I'm sure we'll get into in just a moment.
Yeah, it's great to hear that update from you, John. All right, guys. So part 3. Now, part 1 and part 2 are on my previous podcast. Going forward, it's all going to be here. I guess the question I would start with is, are there 2 or 3 hot things just on your mind these days that everyone's talking about that fits into this, further signs that we are in the end of the beginning of motion design? Ryan, I know you're about to bubble over, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I feel like this has been building for a while. And I feel like a lot of times you can only really talk about the future until it's in the past, right? Like you can have an hypothesis and kind of guess and look at the couple of things and try to make a correlation. But I wonder if like we've already been in the end for a while, but we just had this nice little burst of a couple years of COVID that made it seem like it was gangbusters, but the reality was always hiding in the background. And now I really feel like, and I don't think it's going to make people happy to hear this, and it's not saying in any way to slag off or diminish anyone, but I think when we're talking about motion design, the gulf between what I would call like order takers and tastemakers has always been there, right? There's always like the people who think of something and then the people who make it, to the point where we say architects and bricklayers and all that mud gets slung back and forth. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But I do think it's become increasingly apparent that there isn't just a gulf between it. It is escalating like very quickly. The difference is becoming much more wide, not just to us, but also to the people who hire us. And I really think that there's going to be a point where it's almost like we have two industries that have the same training, use the same tools, potentially talk to the same clients, but they're almost increasingly becoming two totally separate industries. Right? Like I feel like there's people who are just going to be able to say, hey, I can make something for you. What do you want me to make? And then there's going to be people who are like, I think this is your problem and I can solve it for you. Would you like to draft off my heat in my black box of tools and ideas and obsessions and techniques and ability to put all these wildly disparate things together? We finally started getting hit with several RFPs in a row where the clients are sending us mid-journey images saying, we want it to look something like this. We feel like it should be this. We now have the capability to tell you what the order is that we want, and can you make that for us? And how close can you get to making this thing move? And it really was the bellwether for me of something I feel like I've been ringing for a while, that like we have this I think I said it in the first one, we have this incredible opportunity to be at this place to lead industries and clients forward, or we can sit on our laurels and say, hey, I use After Effects, I use Cinema 4D, and I know how to make these certain kinds of things with this certain kind of style and this amount of time for this amount of money. And it doesn't matter what it ends up having to be because that's not my interest level. I feel like that change is happening when small businesses are coming to you with fully fleshed out ideas and saying, how much? We're here. It's changed. We're here. And that's not like the giant corporations. And it's very interesting to me because my experience in New York, talking to broadcasters, talking to streamers, talking to agencies, they are scared to death of anything with the future because they are on very rocky, almost like earthquake-ridden land right now, and there's still constant aftershocks. And they're telling us, like, we want to use things like AI, and we absolutely are told we cannot. We are forbidden from it. So there's this weird area where it's ethically, we can talk about that. Legally, there's a lot of things trying to be figured out, right? And then just emotionally, as people who are like, have value in what we make and how we make it, that whole landscape is up for grabs. And there are people on both sides that don't care about the ethical or legal side. And I've been having this constant conversation of, at what point am I being irresponsible by not at least being aware of what these things are? And my internal bellwether is I will pay attention to things on the sidelines all the way up until my clients actually start using these tools. And then I have to really start seriously thinking, what is it that we do here? There's this huge fog of war that some people are just cutting through and not only making great stuff, but explain to people what they should be doing with all this new technology and these new techniques.
So John, I'm curious, these terms are maybe a bit triggering. I was almost in my mind imagining the gap between the rich and the poor that we talk about in economics. Is there potentially something like that happening in our industry per what Ryan just laid out?
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a wealth gap, but I would think of it as this gap between those who are looking for the ability to provide this sort of easy service that is just like, yeah, we do that thing that's always been on the menu and we'll deliver that to you and provide us with your precise specifications and something will come out the other side. And then there's those who are looking at new ways to provide a advanced service beyond whatever it is that's coming to them from their clients. Like the notion of clients showing up with their own mid-journey mock-ups means that that's wonderful in many ways, particularly for the clients. And I think I've brought this up before. I talked to some film directors who are making their own concept art using Midjourney. And for them, it was an unbelievably liberating process. It was a thing that they used to like have to have a phone call with somebody, let them make their work, check back in with them again and see how it's going. And they would sit there and just feel as though they had full dynamic control over it. And that's in that particular scenario, that actually seems like a great fit. And I feel awful for any of my friends who are concept artists who are missing out on that opportunity, but I can't help but avoid that. That's very advantageous for that director who has a vision that they want to see put together. And when everyone has access to that same tool, anyone can take any vision and start pushing it forward. And so I would certainly caution anybody who's on the receiving end of Midjourney mock-ups or whatever is in that sort of ballpark to look at that and first take a breath, try and take a few steps back, try to imagine what their prompt was or what the core idea was that they were going for, and start with evaluating that and start with looking at how you can improve upon that. And don't think about it just in terms of the quality of lighting in the Midjourney export or whatnot. Start really assessing, is this solving the core problem, and what other pieces of process can come into play to service that problem much better. And I think it's a weird thing. I've been having a lot of conversations with people just around the use of the term strategy. And I think that is almost how I would define the gap, there being a strategy gap. And it's tricky because you got to be careful when you like fling around a term like strategy. Like I've seen a sort of, and I don't know if you guys have been tracking the sort of really rough time that IDEO has been having recently and whatnot. Strategy has in some circles become almost a dirty word. It's that thing of, oh, that sounds like white guys in front of whiteboards, wasting time, wasting money, burning through energy very slowly and getting nowhere. And I think that those of us, particularly when we talk about motion design, like our discipline of choice or our favorite discipline, we're all used to moving a lot faster. And I think when those of us in this space are really pursuing strategy and accepting of the principles of that and how you can work that into your process and do it swiftly, do it efficiently, and do it effectively, I think that's a huge amount of value that you can bring to the experience. And I think that ties into a little bit of what you're alluding to, Ryan, which is the term motion design even going to be necessary soon? Is it just going to be like the same thing as being like, I'm a Cinema 4D file opener or whatnot? Like we don't say that.
It's Flash programmer.
Yeah, it's one of the kinds of like vocabularies or almost dialects that we choose to speak in. And that's, for me, that's the thing that I love about this discipline of motion design. It's incredibly flexible. It can, and it's the super tool for communication, basically. And when you're looking at it as a super tool for communication, it doesn't just have to be like communicating in commercials to tell people to buy things. You can use motion design just to communicate to your clients, just to convey your strategic advantages and be able to do that in a way where we've all spent our careers figuring out how to convey information as quickly or as densely or as memorably as possible. That works whether you're trying to persuade a client or government or a startup or whatever it may be. And I just think, look at the other aspects or attributes of just ways that you can bring a more strategic solution to your clients, to the people that you're serving, and then let motion design be your weapon that you fire that out of.
Sometimes in these calls, we get very heady and we talk about things just in terms of concepts that like we are spending a lot of time thinking. I don't know if it necessarily makes sense one-to-one with somebody. So let me give you a real actual, like the actual thing, right? Imagine there's a streamer and they have a team inside the streamer that has to speak to both the creative side people, like the people who are figuring out what content to make for the streamer, but also it's a tech platform. So they have to be able to actually talk to the designers and developers on the tech side that don't have anything to do with the creative side, but they're really worried about like, how can we use our algorithm to get more accurate things based on viewing data, feed them the next thing that they're going to spend 4 more hours watching, right? Like that's their side. They have they don't care about what actor got hired or what the deals were, but we know people watch something and we can get them to watch more, and we are not as good as the other 3 people ahead of us. So there's an internal in-house team at this streamer who has to basically make content that bridges the gap left and right between those two. And this is all brand new. And we happen to talk to this team and they're like, we think we need a video. And here's some AI stuff that we built that we think we should make this character that talks to both sides. That's basically like this like in-house character. And they have some of what you've seen a million times, like the prototypical faux Pixar Midjourney generated character. And we're like, yeah, you know what? You could do 2 things. You could hear that as an order taker, product focused person, be like, cool, we can tell you how much it'll cost to make that and we'll go off and make it for you. Oh, we have to triple bid. Okay, we'll make a deck. That's one way. Or you could be a solutions focused team who's looking at all the tools that are out there and you're actually listening. You're not just hearing them, but you're listening to them. And you're listening to them and you sense, oh, these people don't really know what the best solution is. and they're doing their best by trying to give you an image in their head that might be it. Now you get to start asking questions because you've listened. So why is it that you pick this female character that looks like she's in her 40s, that could be a librarian? Who is she trying to speak to? And what is it that she's trying to convey? And who is the audience? And all of a sudden you start open. It's actually a great way. You could be like, damn it, they took our jobs. They're already doing it. And they're just telling us what to do because they gave you a couple images. Or you could take it as an invitation to be like, oh, they're trying to think about this and they don't have the language skills or the experience to know what the problem is to the solution we're trying to find. So my response was like, well, you know what? I wonder if it really needs to be a video, because maybe it could actually be like a pitch.com deck with some Rive interactive tools that mimic your interface for your streaming. And you could be showing them through the actual interface the clients would be using, explaining these things. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, come along and pay for us to do a nice workshop to show you what I mean. That's what it could be. Or you could just be, this is it. This is the end of days, and I'm going to get paid $10,000 less to do After Effects, and just decide your own fate right in that very moment. So that's what I mean about listening and hearing, order takers versus like tastemakers. There's all these things that we're in this crux right now that we are all choosing to be or not be.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant example and like the perfect sort of like execution of, hey, let's hold on, let's take a breath, let's get off the treadmill of how this always goes and try something different. And it's astounding to me always, and I think I bring this up regularly, but how many people are fully capable of doing that, but they've spent the majority of their careers getting the shit kicked out of them by ad agencies, and they don't understand their value in those kinds of conversations and think that the only correct answer is just yes to everything and let's try and win the bid.
If you think about motion design as a creative director, what do most people do as a creative director? They assemble their taste based on their interest and then what they can find online. They have huge archives, whether it's on Pinterest or on a shared drive somewhere, and then they assemble those things into some kind of configuration to say, I think it could be like this, and maybe they go and photo bash a couple of other style frames from a bunch of other people's stuff, or they render 2 frames out of like Cinema 4D. But the majority of what work product we make, a lot of times as creative directors, is assembled from either inspiration or actual parts from other people. This just basically codifies and automates what we thought was like an artistic sensibility that only each one of us personally had, right? So no one ever complained about the ethics of going onto 500 sites and pulling reference and then throwing that back along with a couple other people's jobs that they said, maybe a little bit like the animation here and a little bit about the color palette here. And, oh, I love Wes Anderson on center cinematography and 2 shots from that. That was never a problem. That was a way of doing business. But now there's a way all of a sudden where that stuff is basically weaponized and turned into like a tool. I still have issues with all the ethics behind it, but let's also not pretend that wasn't what the majority of like the work of a CD assembling a pitch was at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's also worth just considering that there's definitely this degree to which it's like, okay, individuals will now be able to do that much more themselves. And then that means that there's just going to be fewer opportunities across the board if each person can do that much more. But we're also on the verge of some pretty insane experiences that we cannot even begin to fathom. Like even spatial and augmented reality and whatnot, to me, that's still tip of the iceberg. Like start thinking about like Neuralink and these sort of experiences that when Neuralink is less about you controlling a mouse cursor with your mind and more it feeding your mind whatever it desires, all of a sudden it's going to be like there will not be enough armies working for Weta and ILM and everyone combined to be able to keep up with the appetite for being immersed in a world that's not viewed through a 16:9 frame, but is just something that is like in real time being generated based on your thoughts, mood, emotions.
I was talking to a guy who's working at a tech company. He literally says, like, I've heard you say canvas before, like on a podcast. He's like, if you want to use your language, imagine the need for artists and creatives or prompters or whatever word you want to call it. Imagine each person's life this is going to sound stupid, but I totally believe it when he said it. Imagine each person's life is an infinite, multiversal, personal canvas that needs content constantly fed into it. And you basically tap in or tap out as a person, right? Like I want to go and explore the world with my whatever, like 5-10 years from now, whatever our AR device of choice is going to be, Pepsi or Coke or Apple or Google. But I could be like, you know what, today I want to turn on the Lord of the Rings version of my world. Okay, how does that happen? How does that happen? How does it stay personal? How does it always listen to you? How does it react to you and have this constant level of near photoreal fidelity? Where is that going to come from? It's not going to come from the same several thousand artists working in motion design or the several 10,000 amount of people making VFX. There's going to be a need that this stuff is going to start supplying on top of just the thick layer of garbage that's going to be constantly fed to us as well, right? Like the amount of fully automated YouTube channels and fully automated meme posting things that are just analyzing the top 50 X post combined with the 3 tastemakers that are totally virtual on TikTok. Like the amount of junk that we are going to absorb now, if you think it's bad now, it's going to be worse. But that just means that the really good stuff, people are really going to resonate with that as it comes through. But I agree with you, man. I don't think the amount of like work once we get through this hurdle is going to slow down.
Yeah, especially when you factor in how much we are all like how dominant this sort of swiping through the next Instagram reel or TikTok is, and how people have just let that encroach on more and more of their free time. And even just that, I'm standing on the line at the grocery store for the next 14 seconds. That's enough time to get a little snippet of content, or maybe even flip through 3 of them real fast. And when the barrier...
Or watch them all at the same time.
Right, or watch them all at the same time. And like when the barrier of like having a device in your hand with a screen and whatnot is gone, there is going to be just this insane desire to be continually augmenting and stimulating ourselves in like many more ways that we can't even process. And when we'll all be too grumpy and cranky about it by the time it comes out, that's so weird. But everyone's on a generational scale, everyone's easily adopting these habits and experiences in ways that for them isn't creepy, and it's just like, yeah, whatever. This is just the stuff I'm into.
So just a few days ago, I was in Barcelona for OFF. Mark, who runs Blit.studio, and I went to Tomorrowland, which is this immersive audiovisual experience. And it was my first experience when I said, oh, I see where this is headed. And this is already a year or two old in terms of the technology and the state of the art. But as a creative person, as someone who is curious about story and seeing, of course, in a physical space where the technology is tracking our hands so I can actually manipulate things in the environment and tracking the other people I'm with, but starting to realize, where this is headed is other characters that can respond and react in real time because they're going to be AI, generative, whatever things. And then the way to play with scale and locality, it just made me realize, like I've heard both of you say it on this episode here, we're just at the beginning. And I finally found myself saying, okay, now I care. Like this exhibit I saw was just okay, but I saw where it's headed and I said, that I'm interested in. That's going to be cool, especially when it starts to become story and character and human driven.
We don't even know what we don't even know right now. Like even just look at the numbers, right? So like Disney right now is hurting in terms of a lot of different things, right? They just had a huge controversy with like their board, and there was like a potential investor coming in to try to raid them. And what's really saved them right now isn't the movies or obviously Disney Plus streaming. It's been the theme parks, right? The ability to create this center where everybody wants to go and tune out and enjoy and immerse and pretend like they're part of the characters and stories and worlds that they love. You can only scale that so much, right? You can only build so many Magic Kingdoms and Universal Studios and Disney Worlds. But what does everybody do right now? Everybody literally sits on their couch while they're watching Netflix, while their phone is in their hand, and they're bouncing back and forth between 4 different apps, right? What's the other thing everybody does? Everybody wants their own world, right? They love their world. They have their IP like umbrella of choice that they're like, I'm a Marvel fan, I'm a Game of Thrones fan, I'm a this, I'm a that. What happens when Disney can literally team with Apple or whoever else and they're like, oh, do you like Disney parks? How about you just live your Disney life in anticipation of that park? And you literally can just be like, oh, everything when I'm doing anything other than working becomes that life. I spent a lot of time in manga and anime conventions and experienced like what used to be very like what people thought was behavior that was off the grid, ridiculous, stupid, cosplay, who the kid, you're a grown adult acting like an infant. And that in a very short amount of time has literally gone from being like weird to okay to desirable, right? That transition has happened so fast. I don't think we talk about enough how much people want to. It's no different than people who live and breathe sports, right? And that somehow has been okay. Like you can live and breathe sports. John has the motorcycle helmet behind him. He loves everything with the F1. There's people who they don't wear anything other than Green Bay Packers stuff. And their only discussions outside of work or with their family is sports. Imagine that, but now Disney Life is an app that your whole life is essentially the theme park of choice that reacts to you, tracks to you, rewards you. And then when you finally make it to the physical location, that place knows you and pays all that back to you. You don't think that's not coming, and that's not going to be literally the only way that Disney can scale and say, oh, the whole reason we're making movies that lose money and parks that we have to do all this upkeep is to create this subscription service. Disney Plus is nothing compared to what your whole life being wrapped around that personality and that identifier could be. And I think that's literally like, we don't even know what we don't know. We wouldn't even know, like, you don't think motion designers are going to be needed for that? You don't need people who understand all those technologies and can express that, and every other brand is going to want the same thing. So that's my TED Talk, but I really do know.
I want to take the Disney pill. I want that. Let's do it. Yeah.
Let's do it.
And again, I feel like this is just the only thing I say over and over again. But like when you think of that sort of new kind of experiences that require a combination of, but also pragmatic strategic thinking, do you guys know anybody that could apply their years of experience and skill set towards that? Yes. Everyone we know in these spaces are like the perfect people to be balancing those pieces of the equation and solving those problems, even if they're not rigging the characters or setting the keyframes or whatever, being able to say that they know enough about how you communicate information and create excitement through visuals and use movement to draw attention and whatnot, to have those things, that those pieces of the recipe are always going to be required, and we're always going to need the folks in our wheelhouses to help steer and drive that decision-making process.
Well, I know we're about needing to wrap up here because I know.
I feel like you have 45 more minutes of things to talk about with you all.
Here's the thing I heard John saying, and because I'm going to toss this to you, Ryan, because what I heard him saying was something you've said previously, which is that motion design or motion in general isn't a discipline, it's a philosophy.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the only thing that protects the industry, to be totally honest. And I've been saying it so much that I feel like people get bored of hearing me say it, but I feel like if you view motion design as After Effects with Cine 4D, get ready to be in the cover band. If you view motion design as this unique umbrella that covers almost any creative principle in a way that you are not afraid to bolt new technologies and old principles in a way to create character and storytelling through movement, then you are valuable beyond anything you can actually imagine right now, because no one knows what those surfaces are or how they're going to do it, but they know they need those things. They know somebody who needs those principles, that isn't afraid of dealing with characters, that can get nitty gritty and talk about rigs, but also talk about the difference between looking directly at you and just a head turn and looking at you, right? Like where and when to apply those things. There's not many places in creative industries that have people with the personalities that are interested and can say they know how to do those things and are willing to jump into the ether of the unknown, like we do every single time we start a new project, right? Every time we start a new project, there's something new that we haven't tried before. Almost every job I've ever been on.
So I'm going to wrap up with one final question, and you can answer it with one word. Ryan, do you think there are more obstacles or more opportunities out there in our industry?
I think if you can get past the first set of obstacles, there's a huge amount of opportunity. And I don't know what they are yet, but I feel them coming. And a lot of other people much smarter than me are as excited, if not more, than I am.
And John, obstacles or opportunities, which is more numerous in your mind?
To me, the opportunity is being really good at obstacle courses, like being the American Ninja Warrior expert. That's where I place myself, and I encourage as many people as possible to be training for that obstacle course.
That's a great sign off. That's a good encouragement too. Thanks, guys. I've got a lot to think about, and I wish we could go on for another hour, but we will at some point. We will come back to this because there will probably be an episode 4 or 5, or who knows where we'll go. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you. It's awesome. It's always awesome.
Yeah, always a blast. Been looking forward to this for a while. Let's not wait so long next time.
Indeed. I'll be on top of it. All right. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is a labor of love that requires time, money, and energy to bring you these stories. So if you like The Fabulist, please hit the link in the notes to share this episode or to say thanks to me or the folks at Coop Studios. Thanks.